The beautiful world of Ethermoor was dying, and Admiral Lyrelei Moonwhisper could do nothing to stop it. She stood on the bridge of her flagship Celestial Dawn and watched the dark ships of the Vorthak Empire tear through the crystal cities below like hungry beasts. The elegant spires that had reached toward the stars for thousands of years now crumbled into dust and ash. The floating gardens where her people had grown their food and raised their children were burning bright orange against the black of space. Lyrelei pressed her long fingers against the cool surface of the command console and felt the ship tremble as another wave of enemy fire struck their shields. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet desperation. Their pointed ears were lowered. In grief, and their usual grace was replaced by the sharp movements of people who knew they were about to die. The soft blue glow of their void crystal technology cast strange shadows on their pale faces as they tried to hold together what remained of their once mighty fleet. 3 years ago, the Vorthak had come from the empty darkness between galaxies. Their ships were not built, but grown like twisted plants made of metal and flesh. They did not simply destroy worlds, but consumed them completely. Every living thing on a planet would be drained of its life force to feed the endless hunger of the Vorthak war machine. 17 worlds had already fallen to them, and now Ethermoor would be the 18th. The young navigator, Sylviana Starweaver, looked up from her void sight sensors with wide silver eyes. Her gift allowed her to see energy patterns across vast distances of space, and what she saw now made her hands shake. The girl was barely past her first century, and should have been learning poetry and star-singing in the academies, instead of watching her entire civilization burn around her. Sylviana spoke in a voice barely above a whisper, but every person on the bridge heard her clearly. The enemy fleet was preparing for their final assault on the planet's surface. The bioships were moving into position to begin the consumption process that would drain every last drop of life from Ethermoor. Once that began, there would be nothing left but a dead rock floating in space. Captain Therial Dawnblade contacted them from his ship the Star Guardian, which flew alongside the Celestial Dawn in the desperate formation they had managed to hold together. His voice came through the communication crystals with the steady calm of a warrior who had accepted his fate. He told Lyrelei that his sensors showed the same thing. The Vorthak were ready to finish what they had started, and the Elven fleet was too weak to stop them. Only 17 ships remained from the 1,000-vessel armada that had once protected the Andromeda Spiral. The elves had ruled this part of the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what it meant to face a real enemy. Their weapons were designed for beauty as much as function, and their tactics relied on the graceful coordination that came naturally to their people. But the Vorthak cared nothing for beauty or grace, and their bioweapons grew stronger every time they devoured another world. Far below on the planet's surface, the great capital city of Moonhaven was already half consumed by the creeping biomass that the Vorthak had seeded into the crystal foundations. Lyrelei could see through the tactical displays how the organic corruption spread through the living architecture like a disease. Her people were fighting in the streets with crystal blades and energy weapons, but for every Vorthak creature they destroyed, 2 more emerged from the growing biomass. The War Empress, Zixathara, commanded the enemy fleet from her flagship, which was less a ship than a living creature the size of a small moon. Its surface writhed with weapons that pulsed like beating hearts, and its hull was covered in what looked like scales but were actually sensor organs that could detect the smallest energy signature across light years of space. The creature ship had been grown in the depths of the Vorthak home galaxy from the consumed remains of 100 different species. Admiral Cassandra coordinated the attack from her own bioship, which resembled a massive insect with wings that could fold space around them for faster-than-light travel. She was known throughout the galaxy as a tactical genius who had never lost a battle. Her strategies had crushed the defenses of every world the Vorthak had encountered, and she saw no reason why the elves would be any different from the others who had fallen before them. The bioweapon specialist, Velnara, worked from deep inside the Empress flagship, where she tended to the consumption spores that would be used in the final phase of the planet harvest. These microscopic organisms could break down any form of organic matter and convert it into pure energy that the Vorthak could absorb. Once released into a planet's ecosystem, they would spread faster than any defense could stop them. Lyrelei made the hardest decision of her long life and gave the order for all remaining elven ships to form the death formation around their homeworld. It was an ancient battle pattern that had not been used for over 2,000 years because it meant that every ship and every crew member would fight until they were destroyed. There would be no retreat and no survivors, but they would die protecting the world that had given them life. The 17 ships moved into position with the fluid grace that marked all elven technology. Their crystal hulls caught the light from Ethermore's sun and reflected it in patterns that would have been beautiful if they were not preparing for their final battle. Each ship was unique and had been grown rather than built, using techniques that combined technology with the natural forces of life itself. Theriel activated his weapons systems and felt the familiar hum of power flowing through the Star Guardian's crystal matrix. His crew of 40 warriors had volunteered to stay with him, even though they all knew they would not see another sunrise. They were young and old together, united in their determination to make the Vorthak pay dearly for their victory. Sylviana suddenly gasped and pointed at her sensors with trembling fingers. Something impossible was happening at the edge of the star system, where space itself seemed to be tearing open like fabric. An energy signature unlike anything in their vast databases was approaching fast, and it was massive beyond belief. The girl's void sight showed her patterns of force and motion that her mind could barely understand. But one thing was clear. Something was coming from the unknown depths of space, and it was heading straight for the battle that would decide the fate of the elven race. Whatever it was moved with purpose and power that made even the great Vorthak bioships seem small by comparison. For the first time in 3 years of desperate fighting, a spark of hope flickered in Leralei's ancient heart. Space exploded into brilliant blue fire as something impossible tore through the fabric of reality itself. The energy release was so massive that both the Elven and Vorthak fleets had to adjust their sensors to avoid being blinded by the sudden burst of light. Where empty space had been only moments before, now hung a ship unlike anything either species had ever encountered. The UES Thunderstrike emerged from the rift like an ancient god of war stepping onto a battlefield. Its hull was dark gray metal, scarred by countless battles and bristling with weapons that radiated barely contained power. The ship was huge, even by galactic standards, but it moved with the fluid grace of something much smaller. Strange energy patterns danced along its armor plating, and its engines burned with the captured fury of a star's heart. Captain Maya Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her ship and studied the tactical display with the calm focus that had carried her through a dozen impossible battles. She was a small woman with dark hair pulled back in a military style and eyes that missed nothing important. Her uniform bore the marks of someone who had earned her rank through combat rather than politics, and her hands rested easily on the weapons controls. Maya looked at the beautiful crystal ships of the elves as they formed their desperate last formation around the dying planet below. She had never seen anything like their elegant vessels, which seemed to be made of living light and flowing energy. But she also saw the dark bioships of the Vorthak Empire spreading through the system like a plague of mechanical locusts, and she understood immediately what was happening here. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Carter worked frantically at the tactical station as she tried to make sense of the alien technologies surrounding them. She was tall and lean with blonde hair and the quick movements of someone used to processing information at high speed. Her fingers danced across the control surfaces as she analyzed the energy signatures of both fleets and began calculating firing solutions for weapons that had never been tested against these unknown enemies. Lisa reported to the captain that the crystal ships appeared to be defending the planet while the bioships were clearly attacking it. Massive energy readings from the surface suggested that some kind of consumption process was already underway down there. Whatever the dark ships were doing to the world below, it was draining the life from every living thing on the planet. Chief Engineer Amanda Foster called up from the engine room with excitement in her voice that was unusual for the normally calm woman. She had been monitoring the alien energy patterns and discovered something remarkable about the crystal ships. Their power systems operated on principles that seemed to complement human technology in ways that should have been impossible. If they could find a way to interface with those systems, the results might be spectacular. Dr. Helen Brooks studied the life sign readings from her medical station with growing horror. The dark ships were not just killing the people on the planet below, but actually consuming their life force to power their own systems. Millions of signatures were disappearing every minute as some kind of bioweapon spread across the surface. She had never seen anything so completely evil in all her years of practicing medicine. Maya made the decision that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had spent centuries dreaming of the day they would encounter other, intelligent life among the stars. They had imagined peaceful first contact and cultural exchange and the sharing of knowledge between species. But the first aliens they found were watching genocide happen in real time, and that changed everything. The captain gave the order to open fire on the Vorthak bioships with everything the Thunderstrike had to offer. Human kinetic accelerators spat projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed toward targets that had never faced such concentrated firepower. Plasma torpedoes guided by advanced artificial intelligence sought out weak points in organic hulls with deadly precision. Energy beams that could cut through the heaviest armor sliced into bioships that had grown complacent after years of easy victories. The effect was immediate and devastating for the Vorthak forces. Ships that had seemed invincible suddenly found massive holes torn through their living hulls as human weapons punched through defenses that had never been designed to stop such attacks. Bioships that had been preparing to begin the final consumption of the planet below suddenly found themselves fighting for their own survival instead. Admiral Lirelei Moonwhisper stared at her tactical display in amazement as the unknown ship destroyed an entire attack wing of Vorthak vessels in its opening salvo. The newcomers' weapons operated on completely different principles from anything in the Elven databases, but their effectiveness was beyond question. For the first time in 3 years of desperate fighting, the enemy was actually taking serious damage. Sylviana Starweaver used her void sight to study the energy patterns of the mysterious ship, and what she found made her gasp in wonder. The vessel's power systems were chaotic and aggressive compared to the elegant harmony of Elven technology, but there was something else there as well. A kind of controlled fury that spoke of a species that had learned to wage war with both science and passion. Lirelei opened communication channels on all frequencies, hoping to contact whoever commanded this unexpected savior. She had no idea if the newcomers would be able to understand Elven language or communication protocols, but she had to try. The survival of her people might depend on coordinating their efforts with this powerful ally who had appeared from nowhere. The response came faster than she had dared to hope, as the alien ship's communication system somehow interfaced directly with Elven translation crystals. A woman's voice spoke with authority and determination as she identified herself as Captain Maya Rodriguez of the human vessel Thunderstrike. She offered immediate assistance in defending the planet and requested tactical information about the enemy forces. Captain Theriel Dawnblade felt hope surge through his heart for the first time since the war began as he watched human weapons tear through Vorthak bioships like they were made of paper instead of living metal. His own ship's crystal cannons suddenly seemed to strike with renewed power, as if the presence of this new ally had somehow strengthened their effectiveness. War Empress Zixthera felt something she had not experienced in centuries of conquest, as her supposedly invincible fleet took massive casualties in the opening moments of battle with these unknown humans. Her bioships were adapting to the new weapons as quickly as they could, but the damage was already severe. For the first time since leaving their dying home galaxy, the Vorthak faced an enemy that could actually hurt them. Admiral Kessiandra immediately began analyzing the human attack patterns and weapon signatures, but what she found troubled her greatly. These newcomers fought with a combination of advanced technology and tactical flexibility that she had never encountered before. Their weapons were clearly designed by a species that understood war at the deepest level, and their coordination suggested military experience against dangerous enemies. The battle raged across the entire star system as human and elven forces found themselves fighting side by side against an enemy that had seemed unstoppable only minutes before. Plasma fire and crystal beams lit up the darkness of space, while bioships writhed and died under the combined assault of two species that had never imagined each other's existence until this moment of desperate alliance. Captain Rodriguez opened direct communication with Admiral Moonwhisper as their two fleets fought desperately to save what remained of the Elven homeworld. Despite the language barriers that their translation systems had to work through, the urgency of battle created an immediate understanding between the two commanders. Maya's aggressive human tactics combined with Liralei's elegant strategic thinking to create new patterns of warfare that caught the Vorthak completely off guard. The human. Captain quickly learned that the elves had been fighting this war for 3 years and had lost almost everything they held dear. Their crystal technology was beautiful and powerful, but it had been designed for a more civilized kind of warfare. The Vorthak bioships grew stronger by consuming their enemies and adapted to new threats with frightening speed. Only the desperate courage of the elven crews had kept them fighting this long against impossible odds. Chief Engineer Amanda Foster worked frantically in the Thunderstrike's engine room to establish a connection with the elven power systems. What she discovered amazed her beyond belief. When human plasma energy was channeled through elven void crystals, the resulting power output was far greater than either technology could achieve alone. It was as if the two systems had been designed to work together, even though their creators had evolved on opposite sides of the galaxy. Amanda contacted the elven ship Celestial Dawn and began sharing technical specifications with their engineering teams. The elven technicians were initially suspicious of human methods, which seemed crude and violent compared to their own elegant solutions. But when they saw the power readings from the combined systems, their doubt quickly changed to excitement. Working together, they began retrofitting weapons that could hurt the Vorthak in ways neither species had managed alone. Dr. Helen Brooks received her first elven patients when the Thunderstrike's shuttle bays opened to accept refugees from the AudioBook battle. She had studied xenobiology, but actually treating alien patients was completely different from reading about theoretical anatomy. The elves were tall and graceful, with pointed ears and silver eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Their bodies were more fragile than humans, but they healed faster, and their blood actually glowed with soft blue light. Helen worked alongside elven healers who used crystal technology to repair injuries that would have been fatal by human standards. She shared human medical techniques that proved surprisingly effective on elven physiology while learning their methods of using life energy to accelerate healing. The medical bay became a place where two species learned to save each other's lives while the battle raged around them. The combined human-elven fleet began pushing back the Vorthak forces for the first time since the invasion began. Human railguns worked in perfect coordination with elven crystal cannons, while plasma torpedoes guided by advanced targeting systems struck at bioship weak points that elven void sight could detect across vast distances. The enemy ships that had seemed invincible suddenly found themselves outmatched by opponents who combined ancient wisdom with modern firepower. War Empress Zixthara realized that she faced the first serious threat to her empire's expansion in over 1,000 years. From her flagship creature, she watched her supposedly unstoppable bioships being destroyed by weapons that operated on completely unknown principles. The humans fought with a savage efficiency that reminded her of her own people's desperate hunger, but their motives seemed to be protecting others rather than feeding themselves. The Empress made a decision that would have consequences far beyond this single battle. Rather than retreat and preserve her forces, she chose to unleash her most terrible weapon against the planet below. Deep within her flagship creature, Velnara prepared the consumption spores that would turn Ethermore itself into a massive bomb, capable of destroying every ship in the star system, including the troublesome humans. Sylviana, Starweaver's void sight, detected the new threat just as the bioweapon specialist began releasing millions of microscopic organisms toward the planet's surface. The young navigator's gift allowed her to see the energy patterns of living things, and what she saw filling the space around Ethermore terrified her beyond words. The spores would consume everything organic on the planet and use that energy to create an explosion that would crack the world's core. Dr. Brooks worked desperately with Sylviana to understand the nature of the bioweapon and find some way to counter it. Human medical technology included advanced nanotechnology designed to fight diseases at the cellular level. When combined with elven knowledge of life energy manipulation, the result was a possible countermeasure to the Vorthak spores. But delivering the treatment would require someone to fly directly into the planet's biocontaminated atmosphere. Admiral Kesizandra adapted her tactics to account for the human threat by deploying her most advanced bioships against the Thunderstrike. These vessels had been grown specifically to counter new forms of technology, and they began analyzing human weapon systems with frightening speed. Each attack revealed more information about human capabilities, and the bioships started developing resistances to plasma fire and kinetic weapons. Lieutenant Commander Carter realized that the Vorthak were learning from every exchange of fire and adapting their defenses accordingly. She began varying human attack patterns and working with elven tactical officers to create unpredictable combinations of weapons fire. The key was to stay ahead of the enemy's adaptation cycle by constantly changing their approach to the battle. Captain Theriel Dawnblade led a desperate strike force of the fastest elven ships toward the Vorthak flagship in an attempt to disrupt whatever terrible weapon they were preparing. His crystal fighters danced between bioship defenses with impossible grace, while human plasma torpedoes cleared a path through the enemy formation. The combined assault was beautiful and deadly, as two species learned to fight as one. The battle reached a critical point as consumption spores began falling like deadly rain toward Ethermore's surface. Every second of delay meant more of the planet would be contaminated, and the eventual explosion would grow larger. Sylviana volunteered to pilot the countermeasure mission, even though channeling the amount of life energy required would almost certainly kill her. Dr. Brooks insisted on accompanying the young navigator despite having no experience with elven technology. Maya Rodriguez watched the tactical display and realized that they were fighting for more than just one planet or one species. The Vorthak represented a form of life that could only survive by consuming others, and if they were allowed to continue their expansion across the galaxy, every civilization would eventually face the same fate as the elves. This battle would determine whether cooperation or consumption would rule the stars. The combined fleet held formation around Ethermore as spores continued to fall and bioships pressed their attack with renewed fury. Human and elven crews worked together with growing coordination as they learned each other's strengths and compensated for weaknesses. The space around the dying planet lit up with weapons fire that represented the desperate hope of two species who had found each other in their darkest hour. Lieutenant Commander Carter led the desperate assault on the Vorthak flagship with a mixed force of human marines and elven warriors who had never fought together before this moment. Their shuttles and fighters dove through the creature ships, defensive fire, while the massive bioweapon continued growing around them like a cancer made of living metal and flesh. Every second they delayed gave the consumption spores more time to spread across Ethermore's surface. The interior of the Empress flagship was like nothing the human marines had ever encountered in their worst nightmares. The corridors were not built but grown from organic material that pulsed with alien life. Walls closed like muscles trying to crush intruders, while floors secreted acids designed to dissolve anything that walked on them. The air itself was toxic to both human and elven biology, but their environmental suits kept them alive as they fought their way deeper into the creature. Captain Theriel Dawnblade moved beside Carter's Marines with the fluid grace that marked all elven warriors. His void crystal blade cut through biomechanical defenders that seemed part plant and part machine, while his energy shield deflected weapons that fired living projectiles. The human soldiers with their plasma rifles and powered armor provided covering fire that allowed the elves to close with enemies too dangerous to face at long range. Deep within the ship, they encountered Vorthak warriors for the first time, and learned why this species had conquered so much of the galaxy. The aliens were tall and lean with too many joints in their limbs and faces that were more insect than mammal. Their weapons were grown rather than manufactured, and they fought with the desperate hunger of creatures who knew that failure meant starvation for their entire civilization. Meanwhile, Sylviana Starweaver and Dr. Brooks raced toward Ethermore's surface in a specially modified elven shuttle that had been equipped with human medical technology. The planet convulsed around them as consumption spores spread through its crystal matrix like a disease. Entire continents were already showing the signs of biocontamination as the organic corruption spread faster than any natural process could account for. Helen Brooks monitored her nanobotic countermeasure as it prepared to deploy against the Vorthak bioweapon. The tiny machines had been programmed with elven life energy patterns that would allow them to fight the consumption spores on their own level. But the process required Sylviana to channel dangerous amounts of void energy through her nervous system to power the nanobots and guide them to their targets. The young elven navigator closed her silver eyes and reached out with her void sight to touch the planet's dying life force. What she found there was worse than she had imagined. The consumption spores were not just killing Ethermore, but transforming it into something alien and hungry. If the process continued, the entire world would become part of the Vorthak bioweapon system. Above them, Captain Rodriguez and Admiral Moonwhisper coordinated their combined fleets in an increasingly desperate battle against bioships that seemed to learn from every attack. Human railguns and missile systems worked in perfect timing with elven crystal cannons and void lance arrays, but the enemy adapted with each exchange of fire. New defensive systems grew from the bioships' hulls while weapons evolved to counter human and elven technologies. Amanda Foster pushed the Thunderstrike's engines far beyond their safety limits as she channeled more power through the ships, systems than they had been designed to handle. The hull plates glowed red-hot from the energy overflow, while the reactor core burned with barely contained fury. She knew that one mistake would destroy the ship and everyone aboard, but without maximum power, they could not keep up with the elven vessel's impossible maneuvers. Lyrelay Moonwhisper felt the combined life force of her dying world flowing through the Celestial Dawn's ancient crystal core as she prepared for a sacrifice that would either save her people or destroy what remained of them. The Elven Admiral was over 3,000 years old and had seen the rise and fall of civilizations across the galaxy. Now she would give her own life force to power one final desperate gambit. War Empress Zixthara made the decision that revealed the true nature of her species' desperate situation. Rather than retreat and preserve her forces for other battles, she began the process of combining her entire fleet into a single massive bioweapon capable of consuming not just planets, but entire star systems. The Empress had kept this secret from her own people, but the Vorthak were not conquerors by choice, but refugees from a dying galaxy who had to consume other worlds to survive. The revelation came through intercepted communications that Dr. Brooks was able to decode using her medical knowledge of biomechanical systems. The Vorthak had once been a peaceful species of builders and artists who lived in harmony with their environment, but their home galaxy was dying from entropy and heat. Death, and they had been forced to evolve into consumers or face extinction. Every world they devoured bought them a few more years of survival. Carter's strike team reached the bioweapon control center just as Velnara was preparing to trigger the final phase of the planet consumption process. The Vorthak bioweapon specialist was surrounded by organic computing systems that pulsed with the stored life energy of 17 dead worlds. When she saw the human and elven warriors break into her sanctuary, she did not show fear, but something that looked almost like relief. The battle in the control center was brief, but decisive, as human technology and elven skill combined to overwhelm defenses that had been designed to stop either species alone. But as Velnara lay dying from wounds that her biomechanical body could not heal, she spoke to Dr. Brooks in words that the translation system could barely process. She revealed that the stellar bioweapon was already too advanced to stop and would consume this entire star system, whether the Vorthak fleet survived or not. Sylviana screamed as void energy burned through her nervous system, while her nanobotic countermeasure spread across Ethermoor's contaminated surface. The microscopic machines fought the consumption spores in a battle that could only be seen through her void sight as patterns of light and darkness clashing in the planet's crystal matrix. Each victory bought them more time, but the cost was measured in the young navigator's life force. The planet's core began to stabilize as the nanobots neutralized more and more of the biocontamination, but a new horror was taking shape in the space around them. The surviving Vorthak bioships were flowing together like liquid metal to form something that defied every law of physics and biology. The stellar bioweapon was becoming real, and its hunger was focused on the star that gave this system life. Admiral Moonwhisper felt her ancient heart begin to fail as she channeled the last of Ethermoor's life force through her ship's crystal arrays. The energy required to contain the stellar bioweapon would kill her, but it would also create a window of opportunity for the desperate diplomatic solution that Captain Rodriguez was trying to negotiate. Sometimes the greatest victory required the ultimate sacrifice. The space around the dying planet became a storm of energy and matter as three species fought for the future of the galaxy itself, while a weapon capable of destroying stars took shape around them all. Captain Rodriguez made the decision that would change the course of galactic history as the stellar bioweapon continued to grow around them like a cancer made of stars and darkness. Instead of continuing the cycle of destruction that had brought the Vorthak to this point, she opened communication channels to War Empress Zixthara and proposed something that neither species had considered possible. Humanity would share their terraforming technology with the Vorthak Empire if they would stop the consumption of existing worlds. The offer came at the moment when the Empress was preparing to trigger the stellar bioweapon that would destroy this entire star system, including her own forces. Zixathara had ruled her people for over 1,000 years and had watched them transform from peaceful builders into desperate consumers who could only survive by devouring other civilizations. The human proposal offered something she had thought lost forever, which was hope for a future that did not require endless war. Dr. Brooks worked frantically with the dying Velnara to understand the biomechanical systems that controlled the stellar weapon, while Sylviana Starweaver used her void sight to map the energy patterns that held the massive creature together. The young elven navigator was barely conscious after channeling so much life force through her nervous system, but she could see possibilities that neither human science nor Vorthak biotechnology had imagined alone. The revelation that changed everything came when Helen Brooks realized that Vorthak consumption technology could be reversed to create life instead of destroying it. Their biomechanical systems were perfectly designed to transform raw matter into complex organic structures, but they had been programmed by desperation to consume rather than build. Human genetic engineering combined with elven life cultivation techniques could reprogram the entire system to serve creation instead of destruction. War Empress Zixathara listened to the human proposal while her fleet continued forming the stellar bioweapon around them. She had never trusted any species outside her own empire because every encounter for the past 1,000 years had ended in warfare. But the humans had appeared from nowhere to defend strangers they had never met before, and that suggested a kind of nobility that the Vorthak had forgotten they were capable of feeling. Admiral Moonwhisper felt her life force flowing out of her ancient body as she channeled the last energy of Ethermore through her ship's crystal arrays to contain the growing bioweapon. The elven admiral knew she was dying, but she also knew that her sacrifice might give the three species enough time to find a solution that did not require the destruction of everything they had fought to protect. Lieutenant Commander Carter and her strike team worked desperately to modify the bioweapon control systems, while Captain Therial Dawnblade held off the remaining Vorthak defenders. The elven warrior fought with impossible grace as his void crystal blade cut through enemies that seemed to be part machine and part living nightmare. His energy shields flickered under the strain of deflecting weapons that fired concentrated death at their targets. The breakthrough came when Dr. Brooks discovered ancient Vorthak records hidden deep within the bioweapon's organic memory systems. The files revealed that her people had once been known throughout their home galaxy as the greatest terraformers and life gardeners who had ever existed. They had created worlds of impossible beauty and complexity before the heat death of their galaxy forced them to become consumers instead of creators. Sylviana Starweaver used the last of her strength to establish a mental link between human nanobotic technology and Vorthak biomechanical systems through her void sight abilities. The connection allowed Dr. Brooks to reprogram the consumption spores that had been designed to devour Ethermore and transform them into healing agents that began repairing the damage they had caused to the planet's crystal matrix. The stellar bioweapon suddenly began to change as Velnara used her dying breath to trigger the new programming that would reverse its function from destruction to creation. Instead of consuming the local star, the massive organism began breaking down the dead matter floating in space and using it to create the building blocks of new worlds. The process was slow and uncertain, but it proved that the technology could work. Zixathara made the choice that saved 3 civilizations when she ordered her remaining fleet to stand down and accept the Human Alliance proposal. The Empress had spent 1,000 years watching her people slowly lose their souls to the hunger that kept them alive, and the chance to become builders again was worth any risk. She transmitted the order to cease all consumption operations and begin cooperation with the human and elven forces. Captain Rodriguez coordinated the establishment of the first joint research station using components from all 3 fleets as engineers and scientists from different species worked together to develop the new terraforming technology. Chief Engineer Amanda Foster found herself working alongside Vorthak biotechnicians who had never imagined that their consumption systems could be used to create instead of destroy. The space around Ethermore became a laboratory where 3 different approaches to manipulating matter and energy were combined into something entirely new. Human industrial efficiency merged with elven harmony with natural forces, while Vorthak biomechanical expertise provided the organic flexibility needed to adapt the technology to different planetary environments. Admiral Moonwhisper died with a smile on her ancient face as she felt Ethermore's crystal cities beginning to grow again beneath the surface. Her sacrifice had given them the time they needed to prove that cooperation was stronger than consumption, and that hope could emerge from even the darkest circumstances. Her last thought was that her people would survive to sing among the stars again. Sylviana Starweaver recovered slowly from her ordeal, but found that her void sight had been permanently enhanced by the experience of channeling so much life energy through her nervous system. She could now detect suitable worlds for terraforming across vast distances of space, and her gift became crucial for finding planets where the new technology could be tested safely. The first successful terraforming project began on a dead world, in a nearby star system where Vorthak biomechanical systems, guided by human engineering and powered by elven life energy, transformed lifeless rock into a garden world in less than a year. The planet became a symbol of what the three species could accomplish when they worked together instead of fighting each other. Dr. Brooks established the first medical exchange program between the three species as she trained human doctors in elven healing techniques while learning Vorthak biomechanical medicine. The knowledge shared between their different approaches to preserving life led to medical advances that benefited everyone involved in the alliance. Captain Theriel Dawnblade became the first elven officer to serve aboard a human vessel when he accepted a position as tactical advisor on the Thunderstrike. His understanding of elven crystal technology, combined with human weapons systems, created new defensive capabilities that would prove crucial in the years to come. The alliance expanded rapidly as other civilizations detected the energy signatures of successful terraforming operations and came to investigate. Word spread across the galaxy that three species had found a way to create worlds instead of consuming them, and many others wanted to join the effort. The Galactic Life Preservation Alliance grew from a desperate last stand into a force for positive change throughout the star systems. Years later, Captain Rodriguez stood on the observation deck of the new Alliance headquarters built in orbit around the restored Ethermore and watched construction ships from dozens of different species working together to build a better future. The crystal gardens of the elven homeworld bloomed again beneath them, while human industrial platforms and Vorthak biomechanical systems worked in harmony to support life on a scale that none of them could have achieved alone. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders that none of them had imagined. But now they would explore it together as allies instead of enemies, and the darkness between the stars no longer seemed quite so empty or cold.